I never thought my life would change because of a text message. But there I was, sitting in my car at a red light, smiling at my phone like an idiot. 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, the photo I was about to show Travis. After 3 years of trying, we'd finally done it. My name is Sarah, and that moment of pure joy was the last one I'd have for a very long time. I remember everything about those few seconds. The way the afternoon sun hit my dashboard. The faint smell of the air freshener Travis always teased me about. The song playing on the radio, some pop hit about forever love that I used to roll my eyes at but suddenly felt perfect. The light turned green. I pulled forward, already imagining Travis's face when I showed him the picture. He'd been dropping hints about wanting kids since our wedding day, and his mother Irene had been not so subtly asking about grandchildren at every family dinner. I never saw the truck coming. The impact came from my left side, a violent explosion of metal and glass. The world spun and time seemed to stretch like taffy. I remember thinking absurdly that I needed to protect my phone so Travis could see the picture. When everything stopped moving, I couldn't feel my face. Warm liquid dripped down my neck, and somewhere far away, people were screaming. A man's voice kept saying, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The words floated around me like leaves in the wind. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Don't move." A paramedic's face appeared in what was left of my driver's side window. "We're going to get you out." I tried to speak to tell them about the baby, but my mouth wouldn't work right. The last thing I remember before passing out was someone holding my hand and promising everything would be okay. They lied. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. Travis was there, asleep in a chair beside my bed. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. I tried to reach for him, but my arms felt like they were made of lead. "Travis!" My voice came out as a whisper. He jerked awake, his eyes finding mine. For a split second, something flickered across his face, something that made my stomach twist. But then he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, beautiful," he said, taking my hand. "You had us worried." I tried to smile back, but my face felt wrong. Stiff. Like it belonged to someone else. "The baby," I managed to say. "Is..." Travis's hand tightened on mine. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." His voice cracked. "The doctors did everything they could." I closed my eyes, feeling the world tilt beneath me. Through the fog of pain medication, I heard the door open and recognized Irene's perfume before she spoke. "Travis, honey, the doctor needs to speak with you." Her voice was soft, careful. "About the reconstruction options." "I'll be right back," Travis said, squeezing my hand before letting go. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to drift off. But I heard them in the hallway, their voices carrying through the partially open door. "She's going to need extensive surgery," Travis was saying. Her face. "Mom, I don't know if I can." "Shoo, darling. We'll figure it out. One step at a time." I lay there, tears sliding silently down my ruined face, as my husband and his mother discussed my future like I was a problem to be solved. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Something hard and cold took root where warmth and hope used to live. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my old life ended. The moment Sarah Blake, loving wife, hopeful mother-to-be, eternal optimist, began to fade away. And something else, something stronger and darker, began to take her place. Coming home from the hospital felt like walking into someone else's life. Everything looked the same. Our modern suburban house with its perfectly manicured lawn. The welcome mat Travis's mother gave us as a housewarming gift, even the faint smell of Travis's cologne in the entryway. But nothing felt right anymore. "I've set up the guest bedroom downstairs," Travis said, carrying my bag. The doctor said stairs might be difficult for a while. I noticed he wouldn't look directly at me. 3 weeks in the hospital and he still couldn't meet my eyes. "Thanks," I managed, touching the bandages that covered half my face. "I've invited Mom over for dinner," he added quickly. "She wants to help with your recovery plan." Course she did. Irene Blake never missed an opportunity to manage a crisis, especially one that threatened her son's perfect life. The guest room felt sterile, like a hotel suite. Travis had cleared out all my personal items from our bedroom upstairs, arranging them with mechanical precision. My makeup vanity, a cruel joke now, sat in the corner, mirror turned to face the wall. "Do you need anything?" Travis hovered in the doorway, phone in hand. "I have a few work calls to make, but I'm fine." I wasn't, but what was the point in saying otherwise? Irene arrived precisely at 6, armed with casseroles and opinions. I sat at our dining room table, watching her arrange flowers in a vase while Travis poured wine. "The doctors say the scarring might improve with time," Travis was saying, not looking at either of us. "Well, there are always options," Irene replied, her voice dripping with forced optimism. "I know an excellent plastic surgeon in the city." Very discreet. I pushed my untouched food around my plate. "The insurance won't cover cosmetic procedures." "Oh, darling." Irene reached across the table, patting my hand. "We have to think about Travis's position at the firm. Image is everything in corporate marketing." My fork clattered against the plate. "My face is an image problem?" "Mother," Travis warned, but Irene continued. "I'm just being practical. Travis has worked so hard to build his career. And now with the complications from the accident." She delicately dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Well, sometimes life forces us to make difficult choices." Complications? The word felt like acid in my mouth. "You mean losing the baby?" Travis's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. We hadn't discussed the pregnancy since the hospital. I hadn't told him I was planning to surprise him that day. "Sarah," he started, but I cut him off. "Did you tell her about the baby, Travis? Or just about your wife's ruined face?" Irene's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. "A baby? Oh, Travis." "It doesn't matter now," Travis said quickly, standing up. "What matters is moving forward. Mother's right, we need to think practically." I looked between them, my husband who couldn't meet my eyes and his mother who couldn't stop staring at my bandages. Perfect son and his perfect mother planning my perfect rehabilitation. "I think I need to lie down," I said, pushing away from the table. "Of course, dear," Irene called after me. "We'll figure everything out." In the guest room, I could hear their muffled voices through the wall. "Poor thing," Irene was saying. "But Travis, you're still young. There will be other chances for children once everything is settled." "Mom, please." "I'm just saying, you need to think about your future. Both of your futures." I touched the bandages on my face, feeling the rough texture of gauze where smooth skin used to be. In our wedding photos, Travis used to say I looked like an angel. Now he couldn't even look at me. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Blake, my name is Graham Foster. I'm the father of the young man who caused your accident. Please, I need to speak with you." I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Through the wall, I could still hear Travis and his mother planning my future without me. Something shifted in my chest, not quite hope, but something closer to purpose. I typed back a single word. "When?" I found Travis's whiskey bottle hidden behind the cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink. 3 weeks after I'd come home and already half empty. I might not have noticed if I hadn't heard him stumbling around at 3 in the morning, talking on his phone in what he thought was a whisper. The bandages had come off yesterday. I avoided mirrors now, but I couldn't avoid overhearing Travis's late-night conversations. "You should have seen the client's face today," he slurred to someone. "Like that movie, you know? Two-Face from Batman." A pause followed by drunken laughter. I know. I shouldn't joke. But man, you try living with it." I stood in the darkness of our kitchen, holding his hidden bottle, and felt something inside me crack. The next morning, Travis acted like nothing had happened, kissing my cheek, the unscarred side, before leaving for work. Big presentation today, he said, adjusting his tie. Don't wait up. I waited until his car pulled away before going upstairs to our bedroom. I hadn't been up here since coming home, respecting Travis's unspoken wish to keep me out of sight in the guest room. Everything was exactly as I'd left it the morning of the accident, except for one thing. My old art supplies were missing from the closet. I found them in the garage, buried under Christmas decorations. The wooden box still had my name carved into it, a wedding gift from my grandmother. Inside, my brushes lay untouched, along with the expensive oils Travis had bought me when I'd mentioned wanting to take up painting again. You should focus on more practical things, Irene had said back then. Travis needs a wife, not an artist. I set up the easel in the guest room, facing the window. The morning light fell across my canvas as I mixed colors, muscle memory taking over. Red for anger, black for grief, yellow for the hope I used to feel. The brush moved almost on its own, creating something both beautiful and terrible. Hours passed. The front door opened and closed. Travis's footsteps paused outside my door. Sera? Mother's here for dinner. I didn't answer, adding another streak of red to the canvas. The door opened. Sarah, what are you? Travis stopped mid-sentence. What is that supposed to be? I stepped back from the painting, a woman's face, split down the middle. One side perfect and pristine, the other distorted and fractured, with a wine glass pressed to smiling lips. It's you, Irene's voice came from behind him. Or rather, what you've become. I call it two-face, I said quietly, watching Travis's face pale. Funny, right? I don't understand, he stammered, but his eyes gave him away. Don't you? I heard you last night, Travis. And the night before. And the night before that. Irene stepped between us. Now, Sarah, Travis has been under tremendous stress. If you just try to understand. Understand what? I turned to face them fully, watching them flinch. That my husband makes jokes about my scars? That he hides bottles around the house? That he can't even sleep in the same room as me anymore? That's not fair, Travis protested. I'm trying. To what? Keep up appearances? I gestured to the painting. Is this appearance better? Perhaps, Irene said stiffly. This emotional outburst is a sign you need professional help. I laughed, and the sound made them both step back. Professional help? Like that plastic surgeon you keep mentioning? The one who can fix Travis's image problem. Sarah, please! Travis reached for me, but I moved away. Don't worry, I said, picking up my brush again. I'm working on fixing everything. They left the room, whispering urgently to each other. I turned back to my canvas, adding the final touch, a text message floating in the background. Tomorrow at 2. I'll explain everything. Graham Foster. I stepped back, studying my work. In the painting, both sides of the face were smiling, but for very different reasons. Tomorrow, I'd meet the father of the man who destroyed my face. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I had more painting to do. Cafe Graham Foster chose was exactly what I expected. Quiet, expensive, far from anywhere Travis or Irene might go. I wore a scarf wrapped partially around my face, drawing less attention than the medical mask I'd gotten used to wearing in public. Graham stood when I approached his table, and I immediately recognized the guilt in his eyes. I'd seen it in the mirror often enough lately, that look of someone haunted by what they couldn't change. Mrs. Blake, he said softly. Thank you for coming. Sarah, I corrected, sitting down. Your son, is he? In rehab. Graham's hands tightened around his coffee cup. Again. The accident happened after he left his third facility. I should have seen it coming. A waitress approached, hesitated when she saw my scarf, then plastered on a professional smile. I ordered black coffee, waiting until she left before speaking. Why did you want to meet? Graham pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. These are brochures from the top reconstructive surgeons in the country. I've already spoken with Dr. Chen in New York. He's willing to take your case. I stared at the glossy pages, at the before and after photos of smiling patients. Insurance denied. I'm not offering insurance. Graham's voice cracked. I'm offering to pay for everything. It's the least I can do after what my son. Why? The word came out sharper than I intended. Because I failed him, Graham said simply. And in failing him, I failed you too. The money can't fix everything, but it can fix this. He gestured vaguely toward my face. I opened the brochure, studying Dr. Chen's credentials. Cost listed made my stomach clench, more than Travis made in a year. Your husband doesn't know you're here, Graham said. It wasn't a question. No. Good. He leaned forward. Because there's something else you should know. The night of the accident, my son wasn't alone in the car. My coffee arrived. I wrapped my hands around the hot cup, waiting. There was a woman with him. Someone's wife. Graham's voice was heavy with meaning. They'd been meeting at the Golden Leaf Hotel every Thursday for months. The Golden Leaf, where Travis had his weekly client meetings. The woman survived, Graham continued. No injuries. She left the scene before the police arrived. My son was too drunk to remember her name, but he remembered where she worked. He slid another paper across the table. Blake Marketing Associates. Coffee turned to acid in my stomach. You're lying. I wish I was. For both our sakes. Graham pulled out his phone, showing me a security camera image. A woman hurrying through a hotel lobby, followed by a familiar figure in a gray suit. Travis. Why are you showing me this? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Because you deserve to know the whole truth. And because I'm offering you a choice. Graham tapped the brochures. Dr. Chen can do the surgery next month. He can make you look exactly like you did before. Or he can make you look like someone else entirely. Someone Travis and his friend wouldn't recognize. I thought about Travis's late-night phone calls, his cruel jokes, his inability to look at me. I thought about Irene's constant hints about divorce and fresh starts. Why would I want that? Graham's smile was sad but understanding. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's making them live with their guilt while you become someone new. Someone stronger. I touched my scarf, feeling the rough texture of the scars beneath. When does Dr. Chen need an answer? Take your time. Graham stood, leaving a business card beside the brochures. But remember, this isn't just about fixing what was broken. It's about choosing who you want to become. I sat there long after he left, staring at the security camera photo, at Travis's familiar profile next to an unfamiliar woman. Finally, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Graham. I choose someone new. His reply came instantly. Welcome to your second chance, Sarah. I walked home slowly, planning what to pack, what to leave behind, and how to disappear without a trace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life. It's about rebuilding your own. New York felt like another world. Dr. Chen's private clinic occupied the top floor of a sleek Manhattan building, all glass and chrome and discretion. I told Travis I was visiting my aunt in Ohio for a few months of emotional healing. He seemed relieved to have an excuse not to look at me. The changes will be significant, Dr. Chen said, reviewing my file, but subtle enough to maintain natural features. The goal isn't to create a new person, but to enhance who you could have been. I studied the digital mock-ups on his tablet. The woman in the after images wasn't me, but she wasn't a stranger either. She was who I might have become in another life, one where Travis's mistress hadn't been in that car. How long until I can? I trailed off, unsure how to finish. Return? Revenge? Begin again? 3 months for full recovery. Dr. Chen's eyes were kind. Graham mentioned you're staying at his apartment during the recovery period? I nodded. Graham's Manhattan pied-a-terre had become my sanctuary, filled with his late wife's art collection. He rarely used it anymore, preferring his house in Connecticut. The first surgery was scheduled for tomorrow. Tonight, I sat in Graham's apartment, watching the city lights flicker like stars. My phone buzzed. Travis. How's your aunt? His voice was slightly slurred. Thursday night. Golden Leaf Hotel night. Fine. I touched the surgical consent forms on the coffee table. How's work? Busy. Listen, Mother wants to know when you're coming home. She's worried about appearances. Course she was. I imagined them together at their weekly dinner, discussing how to manage their damaged goods. I need time, I said, the lie coming easily now. To heal. Right. Well, take care of yourself. He hung up before I could respond. My phone buzzed again, a text from Graham. Ready for tomorrow? I started to type yes, but stopped when another message appeared. An unknown number. Are you sure you want to know the truth about that night? My hand shook as I replied. Who is this? Someone who was there. Someone who knows what really happened. Meet me at Riverside Park midnight. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Could be a trap. Or it could be her, the woman from the hotel. The smart thing would be to ignore it. To proceed with surgery with my carefully laid plans. But something in me needed to know. At 11:45, I took a cab to Riverside Park. The night was cool, the Hudson River a black ribbon under moonlight. A woman sat alone on a bench, her face hidden by a hoodie. Mrs. Blake, she said as I approached. Or should I say, the first Mrs. Blake? She pushed back her hood, revealing a face I recognized from office party photos on Travis's desk. Sarah from accounting. He wasn't supposed to be there that night, she said quietly. At the hotel. He was following me, suspicious. When he saw who I was meeting. His client, I finished, the pieces clicking into place. She laughed bitterly. The client's wife. Travis caught us together. He was drunk, angry. Started making threats about exposing everything. That's when. When what? When he called his friend, the guy who hit your car. Asked him to teach his cheating client's wife a lesson. Follow her car, scare her a little. Sarah's voice cracked. But the guy was high, confused. He followed the wrong car. Yours. The world tilted sideways. Travis. Travis arranged the accident. Not yours. He never meant. She stood up, backing away. I just thought you should know. Before you disappear. I watched her hurry away, my mind spinning. All this time, I'd been planning to become someone new to escape Travis's betrayal. But he wasn't just unfaithful. He was the reason I'd lost everything. My phone buzzed. Graham. Surgery prep starts at 6 a.m. Are you ready? I looked at my reflection in the dark window of a passing car. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just become someone new. I'd become someone Travis would never see coming. Ready, I typed back. But we need to modify the plan. 3 months after my surgery, I stood outside our house in the rain, unrecognizable. My new face, beautiful but different, felt like armor. The divorce papers in my bag felt like weapons. I'd planned this moment carefully. Thursday evening, when Travis would be home from his client meeting at the Golden Leaf. When Irene would be over for their weekly dinner, planning their perfect future without their damaged goods. He still worked. I heard their voices from the dining room as I entered, Travis and Irene discussing me. The lawyers say if she doesn't respond soon, we can proceed with abandonment charges, Irene was saying. Really, Travis, it's for the best. That accident was a blessing in disguise. I stepped into the doorway, watching them freeze mid-conversation. Hello, Travis. He stared at me blankly, then with growing confusion. I'm sorry, who? I'm Claire Foster, I said, using the name Graham and I had chosen. Graham Foster's niece. I'm here about Serafina Blake. Travis's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Irene stood quickly, always ready to manage a crisis. Whatever this is about, we can discuss it privately. Can we? I placed the divorce papers on the table. Like you discussed arranging the accident that scarred your wife's face? Color drained from Travis's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah from accounting does. I pulled out my phone, playing the recording from that night in the park. Travis's voice filled the room. Follow her car. Scare her a little. That's not. I never meant. Travis stumbled over his words. You never meant for it to be me? The words came out calm, controlled. Your pregnant wife instead of your client's cheating spouse? Irene gasped. Pregnant? Oh, he didn't tell you that part? I turned to her. About the grandchild you lost because your perfect son wanted to teach someone a lesson? Sera, Travis whispered, finally seeing past the new face to something familiar in my eyes. I pulled out one more document, a police report naming Travis as an accessory to the accident with Sarah's sworn statement attached. Sign the divorce papers, I said quietly. Or everyone learns what kind of man you really are. Travis lunged for the police report, but I stepped back. His foot caught the spilled wine and he crashed into the china cabinet. Crystal shattered around him as he fell. Travis! Irene rushed to help him up, but he pushed her away, blood trickling from a cut on his hand. You can't prove anything, he snarled, but his eyes were desperate. Can't I? I moved toward the door. Graham Foster's legal team would disagree. They're very interested in making amends for his son's part in this, especially now that they know who really orchestrated it. Wait, Travis called as I reached the door. Please. I'll sign. Just don't tell anyone. Like you didn't tell anyone about our baby? The words tasted like ashes. Like you didn't tell anyone about planning the accident? I loved you, he said weakly. No. I touched my transformed face. You loved what I looked like. There's a difference. I left the papers on the table and walked out into the rain. Behind me, I heard Irene's shocked sobs, Travis's desperate attempts to explain. My phone buzzed. Graham, is it done? I couldn't answer. The victory felt hollow, like ashes in my mouth. I'd gotten what I wanted, Travis's signature on divorce papers, his perfect life crumbling around him. But standing in the rain, wearing a stranger's face, I realized revenge hadn't filled the emptiness inside me. I walked to my car, past the spot where Travis used to park, where he'd kiss me goodbye each morning. Past the garden where we'd planned to build a nursery. Past all the dreams that had died the night he chose revenge over love. Another text lit up my phone, an unknown number. You're not the only one he hurt. There are others. We should talk. I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, staring at the message. I'd thought exposing Travis would be the end. But maybe it was just the beginning. Question was, how much deeper into darkness was I willing to go? The art gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite, all here to see the mysterious new artist everyone was talking about. My paintings lined the walls, faces twisted in pain and betrayal, beauty emerging from darkness. All signed with my new name, Claire Foster. I adjusted my dress, still uncomfortable in my new skin, when I saw him. Travis, standing before my centerpiece, a woman's face split between light and shadow, a wine glass reflecting flames. Remarkable work, a voice beside me said. I turned to find a man with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. I'm Eli Turner, the gallery owner. Claire, I replied, watching Travis from the corner of my eye. He was reading the painting's title, Thursday Nights at the Golden Leaf. Your pieces speak to transformation, Eli said. Pain becoming power. Very personal. Before I could respond, Travis's voice cut through the crowd. Where did you get your inspiration? He was staring at me now, recognition flickering in his eyes. 3 months since I'd left him with those divorce papers, and he'd lost weight. Perfect suit hung loose on his frame. Life experience, I said, meeting his gaze. Some people wear masks. I paint them. Sera. He whispered my real name like a prayer or a curse. Eli looked between us, sensing the tension. You know each other? No, I said firmly. Not anymore. Travis grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Let go. My voice carried across the gallery, heads turning. Everything you took from me, my reputation, my mother's respect, my position at the firm. His fingers dug into my flesh. Was revenge worth it? Was Thursday night at the Golden Leaf worth it? I pulled free. Was trying to hurt your client's wife worth what happened to me? To our baby. Eli stepped forward, protective, but I held up my hand. You want to know about inspiration, Travis? Look around. Every painting here tells a story about masks and lies. About men who destroy what they claim to love. I never meant to hit my car? No, you meant to hit someone else's. That makes it better. The gallery had gone silent, watching our drama unfold. In the corner, I spotted Graham Foster, who'd helped orchestrate this moment. Beside him stood Sarah from accounting, her face pale but determined. You're not the only one with stories to tell, I continued. Sarah's here. So are 3 other women from the office, all with similar tales about Thursday nights and threats and accidents. Travis's face went ashen. You can't prove. Actually, Graham stepped forward, we can. My son may have been driving drunk that night, but the police are very interested in who put him up to it. And why? You set this up, Travis realized, looking at the crowd of witnesses. The gallery, the paintings, all of it. No, Travis. You set this up. Years ago, when you decided other people's lives were yours to destroy. He lunged for the painting, but Eli was faster, stepping between us. Travis's fist connected with Eli's jaw instead of the canvas. Security appeared instantly, restraining Travis as he shouted about lies and betrayal. As they led him away, Irene emerged from the crowd, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. I never knew, she whispered, about any of it. The women, the accidents, the baby. Would it have mattered? She flinched at my tone, finally seeing herself in my paintings, the enabler, the keeper of masks. I'm sorry, she said, but I was already turning away. Eli touched his bruised jaw, managing a smile. Hell of an opening night. I should explain. You don't owe me explanations. He gestured to the paintings. Your art already tells the truth. The real question is, what story do you want to tell next? I looked around the gallery, at my pain transformed into beauty, at the women Travis had hurt now standing tall, at Graham's proud smile, at Eli's understanding eyes. Something new, I said finally. Something that isn't about masks or revenge. I'd like to hear that story, Eli said softly. For the first time since the accident, I felt truly seen, not for my old face or my new one, but for who I was beneath both masks. So would I replied, ready to begin again. 1 year later, I stood in my studio apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and new paintings. These weren't about masks or revenge anymore. They showed healing, growth, moments of unexpected joy caught in color and light. A letter from Graham sat on my desk, delivered this morning. I'd been afraid to open it, but now seemed like the time. Dear Sarah, or Claire, you'll always be both to me now. My son came home yesterday. 6 months sober. He asked about you, about the accident. I told him everything, about Travis's manipulation, about your transformation, about how your strength helped me find the courage to reconnect with him. He wants to apologize in person, but I told him that's your choice to make. Some scars need time to heal. Others teach us who we really are. Thank you for showing me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about painting a better future. Graham. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Eli stood there, paint-stained hands holding coffee and bagels. Ready for moving day? Almost. I gestured at the chaos. Just reading a letter from Graham. Good news. Different news. I touched my face, no longer the one I was born with, not quite the one Travis had destroyed, but entirely my own. His son wants to meet. Eli set down breakfast, giving me space to process. That's what I loved about him. He understood the power of silence. The gallery called, he said finally. They want to know if you're ready to show your new series. I looked at my latest paintings. No more darkness, no more hidden meanings. Just light breaking through clouds, hands reaching toward each other, faces emerging from shadows into dawn. I think I am. I picked up my favorite piece, a self-portrait showing all three versions of me, not as masks but as chapters in a longer story. But under my real name this time. Which one? Both. Serafina Claire Blake. No more hiding. He smiled, understanding what this meant. And the meeting with Graham's son? Maybe. I folded Graham's letter carefully. Some stories need proper endings. My phone buzzed, a news alert about Travis. He'd pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, along with several counts of harassment. The other women had come forward, each with their own stories of Thursday nights and threats and accidents. Irene had testified against him. You know, Eli said, reading over my shoulder, your first show helped those women find their voice. They helped me find mine too. I closed the article. I thought revenge would heal me, but it was telling the truth that finally did it. We spent the morning packing, wrapping each painting carefully. Eli handled them like precious things, not because of their value, but because they were pieces of my journey. Near sunset, we carried the last box to his truck. My new apartment was above his gallery, a place for both art and living, he'd said. A place to begin again. Oh, he reached into his pocket. This came to the gallery yesterday. It was a small package from Irene. Inside, I found my old wedding ring and a note. I kept this when Travis threw it away. It belonged to his grandmother, but it should have been yours. Sell it, keep it, whatever brings you peace. I'm learning that's what matters most. Irene. I held the ring up to the fading light. Once it had represented everything I wanted. Now it was just a circle of metal, heavy with history but powerless to hurt me. What will you do with it? Eli asked. I smiled, an idea forming. I think I just found the centerpiece for my new show. Something about transforming old pain into new beauty. He took my hand, the one that used to wear that ring, and kissed it softly. Ready to go home? Home. Not a place to hide or seek revenge. Not a mask to wear or a role to play. Just a space to be wholly, completely myself, scars, changes, strength and all. Yes, I said, leaving the past behind one final time. I'm ready.
I have chosen to initiate a divorce. The house and the automobile are mine to keep. I know that this is a difficult moment, and even though I may have come out as compassionate, my remarks actually have a stronger edge than I meant. I could never have imagined the level of sorrow caused by the smile that accompanied these comments. I was ill. How could he choose to go at that moment? Were we not to take on life's obstacles together? I'm crying because I'm so shocked by his harsh comments and icy attitude. I just can't forgive him. I am determined to make him feel the misery he has caused me, despite my physical weakness. I am starting a new chapter of retribution in my life with this vow. I'm Natalie, and I've dedicated my 42 years of life to being a loyal housewife and providing unwavering support for my family. My husband Bruce and I used to have such a wonderful time together that time appeared to stand still. It was like bright, colorful candy every day. Bruce's kind demeanor and amiable smile immediately put me at ease when we first met through a common friend, making it simple for me to open up to him. I loved every second of our early days together and looked forward to spending as much time as possible with you. Though it's hard to imagine now, our love used to be genuine and profound, full of hopes for a future together. Living with him was like living in a dream. Every day was bright, and I thought our smiles would never fade. But as time went on, Bruce started to alter, probably due to stress from his hard work. Because he had not pursued higher education or qualifications, which would have limited his job options, his pay was not large. I repeatedly advised him to look into getting a new job, but he consistently balked, saying he was happy where he was. Even though we were financially stable and I was working full-time, I was still worried about what would happen if we decided to have a kid, or if I fell ill and was unable to work. I reasoned that it could be helpful if Bruce also secured a steady employment to allay these concerns. An HR department buddy of mine once told me about an administrative position that was open. I knew Bruce found his current job situation tough, so this seemed like the ideal opportunity for him to better it. It didn't require any specific qualifications, just a basic skill set. I was thrilled to propose the role to him, believing it would be a fantastic chance. But Bruce came back with a surprising lack of warmth and defensiveness. "Why do you decide things about my work without consulting me? I picked the location I am in now. Are you suggesting that there's a problem with it?" I was surprised at how he responded. I hadn't meant to question his decisions. I'd simply brought it up out of concern for his future and well-being. I tried to explain my motives and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you with my proposal. I just thought the conditions at your current job seemed tough, and maybe this company would be a better fit for you." However, it wasn't how he saw it. He shot back, almost as if he were speaking to a stranger rather than his spouse, saying, "Just because you're my wife doesn't mean you can interfere in my career decisions." The phrase, "as if you were a stranger," rang true in my head as he turned to leave. Since I am his wife, our family should function as a unit. However, it seemed as though his remarks and manner were aimed at someone else. There were other instances that contributed to the increasing distance that developed between us. His dealings with my family also reflected this strain. My mother was a really nice person who would frequently drop by our house while I was at work. As her way of taking care of us, she would cook and clean, leaving delicious meals in the refrigerator. I was quite appreciative of her work and kept asking her to come over for supper. But of late, Bruce had grown distinctly irritated with her presence. His annoyance was evident when he would return home to discover her in the living room, which widened the already expanding rift between us. When Bruce abruptly said, "You're here again," my mother and I were both taken aback. It caused me to consider the status of our union and our shared future. How were we supposed to bridge the growing gap between us? With a gentle smile, my mother responded, "It's all right, Natalie. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I apologize. I'll leave earlier today." Hearing her say that broke my heart, especially knowing how she always went out of her way to help us despite her busy schedule. "Bruce, please think about how Mom feels," I implored, tears beginning to well up in my eyes, altering the mood in the room. I remembered all the times she had brightened our home and couldn't fathom why Bruce would address her in such a manner. Bruce tried to explain his feelings, saying, "When I come home after working hard all day, all I want is to relax. It's exhausting to have someone else around all the time in my own house." I tried to see things from Bruce's perspective, but my appreciation for my mother's efforts made it difficult. It seemed to me that Bruce was just being stubborn, and I struggled to find a way to communicate my feelings in a manner he could understand. My mother, seeing the tension, reassured me, "Don't worry about it, Natalie. If everyone's happy, that's all that matters to me." Her comforting smile filled me with an overwhelming sense of guilt. That evening, as I savored the delicious meal she had prepared, my emotions were a mix of appreciation and remorse. I couldn't stop thinking about Bruce and how our relationship might be mended. Meanwhile, a new challenge emerged. One day at work, I suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. Thankfully, my colleagues acted swiftly, calling an ambulance and rushing me to the nearby hospital, where a series of medical tests began. Everything felt like a blur as my health took a sudden turn for the worse. I tried reaching out to Bruce, but he didn't respond. Then came the heavy diagnosis: cancer. Thankfully, it was caught early, and the doctors assured me that with the right treatment, I would recover. However, I was well aware of the grueling nature of cancer treatments and braced myself for a challenging journey ahead. I informed Bruce about my diagnosis and subsequent hospitalization, but his reaction was dishearteningly indifferent. His silence during this critical time made me feel incredibly isolated. Nonetheless, I resolved to focus on my treatment, believing that pushing forward was my only viable option. The treatment was even tougher than I had anticipated, my health rapidly declining and confining me to my hospital bed most of the time. Amidst this struggle, Bruce finally appeared in my hospital room one day. "How are you feeling?" he asked nonchalantly. "It's pretty rough," I replied, trying to inject some lightheartedness into the conversation. "It might have been a bit easier if you were by my side." Honestly, I was frustrated by his lack of presence. Why hadn't he come sooner? His support could have made a significant difference during these trying times. Instead of feeling relieved at our reunion, I felt even more isolated. Reflecting on our past only increased my irritation. Then Bruce dropped a bombshell that left me genuinely stunned. "I filed for divorce. I'll take the house and the car. I know it's tough, but hang in there. I don't know how much time you have left, but I hope you keep fighting." "Wait, are you serious?" I exclaimed, unable to hide my shock. "Divorce?" A storm of questions raged within me. Didn't we promise to always stay together? I had always believed that true couples would face challenges together. Bruce's words confused me and left me feeling completely detached. At that moment, a quiet resolve formed within me. "I don't need him anymore," I whispered to myself. "I'll move forward on my own. I'll just forget about him." I decided there and then that he would one day regret underestimating my strength and resilience. But first, I needed to end our relationship properly. "I get it. I'm sorry for everything." "Keep the house, keep the car," I said, relinquishing all ties with a sense of finality, ready to face the next chapter of my life on my terms. "Whatever you want." "If you need compensation money, I'll pay," I said with resignation. Bruce initially looked surprised, but quickly his expression turned into a smug smile. "I didn't expect you to accept it so easily. I thought you'd throw a tantrum. Anyway, take care of yourself, and don't bother inviting me to your funeral," he remarked coldly as he left the room. As he walked away, a smile spread across my face. He didn't realize that he had just fallen into my carefully laid trap. It was going to be interesting to see how his life would fold from here. I reached out to a colleague from a company I knew well. "Hello, long time no talk. I have a favor to ask. Can you help?" Initially surprised, my colleague hesitated, but after I explained the situation, he agreed. "All right, let's give it a try." Everything was set. I imagined Bruce's shocked and anxious face, and this vision brought a smirk to my face. This newfound sense of excitement even boosted my motivation to continue my medical treatments with renewed vigor. A few days passed, and one afternoon after my treatment session, I noticed that my cell phone had received 102 missed calls from Bruce. The thrill of waiting for his call was oddly satisfying. Once I calmed down, I called him back, and his shaky voice greeted me. "Natalie, help me." "I never expected this," he pleaded. Hearing his distress tone made me chuckle internally. This was exactly what I had planned. Trying to sound concerned, I asked Bruce, "Tell me what happened." He took a deep breath before replying, "My name's on the company's layoff list." "I can't believe this is happening." As I listened to his panicked voice, I smirked, knowing that everything was unfolding just as I had orchestrated. The person I contacted was the head of sales at our company. I had asked him to reconsider the business dealings with Bruce's company. Initially puzzled, he reviewed their transaction history and decided it was best to switch to a different partner. That's why Bruce's company started calling me. Deciding to twist the knife a bit, I revealed something I had kept to myself. "You know, there are rumors in your company about you and the new girl." "Everyone likes her," I said, dropping the hint with feigned nonchalance. This added layer was sure to unsettle him even more as my plan continued to unravel perfectly. "Because she's always so cheerful, there are whispers about an affair." "Is that true?" I could hear disbelief in Bruce's voice. "Are you serious? You can't be serious. This has to be a joke." His surprise was understandable. After all, who would think an ordinary employee could wield such influence? "Well, actually," I continued, letting a pause hang to gauge his reaction, "I'm the CEO of this company." Silence fell on the other end of the line as Bruce tried to process the revelation. "It's no lie," I assured him. This was the reason we had been living so comfortably. "My annual income is around $5 million. Your regular salary wouldn't have been enough to support your lavish shopping habits." The truth was, Bruce's spending was exorbitant. The $2,500 monthly allowance he received from me functioned like a second salary, yet it was never enough for him. He often rushed to me with a pleading tone, asking, "Can I have a little more?" At this rate, the money he received from me might end up surpassing his actual salary. While most people would scale back to a more sustainable lifestyle, since I earned $5 million a year, giving Bruce a $2,500 allowance each month wasn't a big deal to me. However, I always wondered what he spent that money on. "Bruce, yesterday was payday, wasn't it?" I asked him, reminding him of our routine. "I've always given you extra money on payday, but that might be difficult from now on. We're not a couple anymore, and it's only natural that you can't expect that monthly allowance." I then cautioned him about the mortgage on the house. "Oh, and be careful with the mortgage. It's $3,800 a month. I know it'll be tough, but you'll need to manage it well. If you're late with the payment, you might have to leave the house." While a $3,800 loan wasn't a burden for me, it was a significant amount for Bruce. From his reaction, it was clear he was both confused and in disbelief, repeatedly muttering, "Really? Can this be happening?" His sense of security was visibly shaken, reflecting his newfound vulnerability. "And that's crazy," I said. What I said was the truth. "This is the result of my efforts to maintain our relationship." I expressed, reflecting on how Bruce took advantage of my presence, pursuing only his desires. Perhaps it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. Why did it come to this? I've been laid off, and now I have to figure out how to get by. How am I going to pay the rent this month? The despair in his voice was palpable. He sounded lost and uncertain about his future. Imagining a brighter future seemed daunting. I understood that Bruce's situation was overwhelming and confusing, a direct result of his past actions and disrespectful behavior towards me and my family. If he had shown genuine care and respect, things might not have deteriorated to this point. This was the consequence of his choices. Bruce remained silent, perhaps at a loss for words. I felt a mix of pity and amusement at his predicament. Was this the end of our conversation? Could I hang up now? But just then he spoke again, his voice tinged with panic. Wait, can we reconsider our relationship one more time? I know it sounds selfish, but I realize now how important you are to me. The idea of starting over with him made my heart race, not out of excitement, but due to the daunting prospect of revisiting all the pain he had caused. He continued, I know I've been reckless lately, and I'm sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital more often. But once you're better, let's go somewhere peaceful and have a relaxing time together. I want to see your smile again. His words were nostalgic, reminiscent of the promises he made when he proposed a life filled with laughter and happiness. Back then, I was so swept up by his charm that I jumped into the relationship without fully considering the consequences. Now, reflecting on married life and all that had transpired, the thought of returning to how things were seemed overwhelmingly complex and fraught with potential pain. It proved challenging to navigate our relationship, especially with Bruce's reckless spending habits. Maybe things might have worked out differently if I had understood him better. He cried out, Natalie, I can't live without you, his voice getting softer. I want to walk through life's obstacles with you at my side. Is it possible for us to restart one more time? He spoke with a great deal of anguish and desperation in his voice. It was hard, in spite of the feelings, to trust him again after all that had transpired. Just stop it now. We're through. I firmly said, I can't go back. I've chosen a new route. His speech carried a hint of sadness, and I could see he truly wanted to make amends. Please allow me to say one more thing. Natalie, you have my undying love. I'll be here if you ever decide to change your mind. Though I was moved by his remarks once, I had already made up my mind about our relationship and my future. I would never longer be swayed by his charming words. Enough already. Words like those are not going to win me over. Consider it. Have you not dated someone else? Shouldn't your attention be on her? Information from Bruce's workplace had informed me about his new relationship. His expressions of affection now sounded phony, like they were just expedient measures to win me back. The realization that he only reached out for help when he was in need and turned away when things got hard was frustrating. Our time together is over. Forget about me and spend time with her. I won't be contacting you, but feel free to get in touch with my attorney if you must. Bruce, look for yourself. He sounded earnest in his plea, but it was time to let him go. That was a result of his decisions, but it would probably make his life worse. I wanted him to be able to support himself because I had my own life to live. I hung up and changed my settings to prevent him from contacting me again after our talk. Bruce made multiple attempts to get in touch, but I stuck to my guns and decided to move on my own, according to my attorney. My lawyer honored my firm determination to keep personal information private. Then, unexpectedly, my attorney proposed that I pursue damages. Although I hadn't thought about it before, it now seemed like a reasonable avenue to get paid. I was aware that Bruce and his new partner were struggling financially because there had been long-standing rumors of his significant debt. I looked into his affair partner more and found that she had run away because of her financial difficulties. Her family was enraged when I contacted them, and they revealed that she was back home now, struggling to make ends meet. It was evident that decisions have repercussions, and they were now feeling them. In the meantime, I overcame cancer and recovered completely, which even took my physicians by surprise. Upon my return to the workplace, I discovered a note from the encouraging sales manager sitting on my desk. His kind remarks moved me to tears. Once word spread that I was back on my own, a few coworkers politely volunteered to Our home felt like a military camp when I was a child. Being a college professor, my father had quite severe rules. Julie, my older sister, was the epitome of the ideal child, obedient, industrious, and constantly seeking to please everyone. On the other hand, I was constantly pushing the envelope. During supper, my father would yell, "Laura, sit up straight. A woman never slouches." I used to roll my eyes, sit up, and then slump back down as soon as he turned to face me. It was an ongoing struggle for dominance. My mother was equally strict, even though she didn't say much. She would look at my choices of friends or my outfits with disapproval. "What are the neighbors going to think?" was her constant question. Even though I felt cramped at home, I managed to make little adjustments to make my place. When I was 17, I began dating Paul, who was 20 and a college student. Everything my parents wouldn't want for me. We met whenever we could, keeping it a secret. I thought for a time that everything was finally working out for me. My goal was to attend college and be free from my controlling parents, but circumstances had other ideas. I became ill in the mornings a few months after turning 19. I initially dismissed it as exam stress, but eventually I was unable to ignore it. I can still picture me standing in a tiny restroom at a petrol station, nervously grasping a plastic pregnancy test. There was one pink line. Good, I had a baby. The days that followed seemed to fly by. My thoughts on what to do would not go away. Though I knew I had to inform Paul, I could never muster the courage to call him. At last, I was unable to resist it any longer. We gathered at our typical location, a little park out of sight for everyone. Paul saw me and grinned, but his smile vanished as soon as he saw my look. Clasping my hand, he said, "Laura, what's wrong?" I withdrew and gave myself a hug. I blurted out, "I'm pregnant." There was a deep quiet after that. Paul's expression wavered between amazement, bewilderment, and finally dread. "Are you certain?" he inquired. Tears were forming in my eyes as I nodded. Every test I took came back positive. With abrupt coldness in his eyes, Paul raked his hands through his hair. "Laura, you must have an abortion to get rid of it. It is your only choice. This is too young for us. It's going to wreck our life." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. Paul, the boy I believed I loved, was encouraging me to get rid of our child, as if it were nothing at all. I turned away and snarled, "Get out of my sight." He didn't say anything more before departing, leaving me to make the difficult choice on my own. It was considerably tougher to tell my parents. I waited until after supper, when my dad was reading the newspaper in the living room, where he usually sat. Julie was there, too, in the background, watching my mom knit. With trembling in my voice, I said, "I have something to tell you." My father gave me a dubious look as he dropped the newspaper. "Laura, what is it?" he inquired. I inhaled deeply. "I have a pregnancy." The response was worse than I had anticipated. My father began to rant about his disappointment and shame, and his cheeks flushed. My mother started crying uncontrollably, worried about what the neighbors might say. Julie was horrified and disgusted as she stood there. My father said, "You'll get an abortion," once he had settled down enough to talk coherently. "We'll locate a covered clinic. Nobody needs to be aware of this error." I didn't want to listen at first, but my family's pressure got to me. A few days later, I was seated in a physician's office. Julie and my mother sat like sentries next to me. The physician, a gracious woman in her 50s, scowled as she reviewed my charts. Then, with anxiety in her eyes, she raised her head to face me. She replied softly, "Laura, I need to tell you something important. If you have an abortion, there's a good chance you may never be able to have children again due to your medical history." Her remarks really got to me. Be unable to become parents again. All at once, the decision seemed obvious. I responded, no, in a louder voice than I had anticipated. I refused to do it. I'm retaining the child. Julie rolled her eyes and my mother gasped, but I refused to back down. It was a quiet and nervous drive home. My father was waiting for us when we came through the door, awaiting news. So he insisted. Frustrated, my mother spit out, she wouldn't do it. With a twisted expression of wrath, my father uttered, "After everything we've done for her." Taking a deep breath, he stated in a last frigid tone, "Leave. Once you've packed, depart this house. I won't have you embarrassing this family with your condition because you're not one of my daughters." My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes hard. "You heard your father. Go." Julie just stood there, silent and judgmental. Tears ran down my face as I rushed to my room, grabbing some clothes and throwing them into a bag. As I headed for the door, my father's voice stopped me one last time. "And don't think about coming back. As far as we're concerned, you're dead to us." The door slammed behind me with a sound that felt final and devastating. I was alone, pregnant, and homeless. In desperation, I called the only person I thought might help, my Aunt Kelly. She and Uncle Scott had always been the outcasts of the family, living in another state and rarely talking to my parents. "Laura, what's wrong, sweetie?" Aunt Kelly's voice was warm and concerned. Through tears, I explained everything. There was a long pause after I finished. "Where are you now?" she finally asked. "I'm outside our house. They kicked me out." Another pause. "Stay right there. We're coming to get you." The drive to Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott's house was long, but it gave me time to think about everything that had happened. Their house was small but cozy. As soon as we arrived, Aunt Kelly fussed over me, making sure I ate something while Uncle Scott carried my bag to the spare room, which would now be mine. "It's not much," he said, placing the bag down, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." I looked around the small, warm room and felt a lump in my throat. "It's perfect," I whispered. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, talking about my future, and getting used to my new life. One evening at dinner, Aunt Kelly spoke up. "We've been thinking," she said. "We want to help you continue your education." I looked up from my plate, surprised. "What do you mean?" Uncle Scott leaned forward. "We saved some money over the years. We never had kids of our own, so we want to use it to help you go to college." I was speechless. After everything that had happened, the idea of going to college felt impossible. I don't know what to say. "Say yes," Aunt Kelly smiled. "We believe in you, Laura. This baby doesn't mean the end of your dreams." With their support, I enrolled in a local community college, majoring in business management. It wasn't easy juggling classes, doctor's appointments, and the challenges of pregnancy, but I was determined to make it work. I also found a job as a waitress at a local restaurant. The owner, Evelyn, was a kind woman who understood my situation and was flexible with my hours. It wasn't much, but it helped me save for the baby and contribute to Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott's household. The day my son was born was the most terrifying and beautiful day of my life. After hours of labor, I held him in my arms, amazed by his tiny fingers and toes. Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott stood nearby, smiling proudly like grandparents. "What are you going to name him?" Aunt Kelly asked softly. I looked down at my son, peacefully asleep in my arms. "Jack," I said. "It means God is my judge, because no matter what anyone else thinks, I know I made the right choice." As I adjusted to being a mother, juggling a newborn with college classes and work, I often thought about my parents and Julie. Did they know about Jack? Did they regret what they had done? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had a new family now, one that accepted and loved me unconditionally. One day during a rare break, I was scrolling through social media when a post caught my attention. It was from Julie. My heart skipped a beat as I read it. Excited to announce that Paul and I are engaged. Can't wait to start our life together. The photo showed Julie smiling, her arm around Paul, the same Paul who had abandoned me and our child. They looked so happy, like nothing had ever happened. A wave of emotions hit me: anger, hurt, and betrayal. But then I looked over at Jack, peacefully playing in his crib, and I realized something important. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. Everything I needed was right here. The years went by quickly in a blur of diapers, textbooks, and late-night study sessions. My last semester was especially tough. I was taking extra classes to graduate on time, still working at the restaurant, and taking care of an energetic 5-year-old. Graduation day was filled with emotions. As I stood in line to receive my diploma, I looked into the crowd and saw Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott beaming with pride. Jack sat on Uncle Scott's shoulders, waving excitedly whenever he caught my eye. The real surprise came later at the graduation party Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott threw for me. While we were celebrating, Evelyn, my boss from the restaurant, pulled me aside. "Laura, I have an offer for you," she said with a smile. "I'm looking for a new restaurant manager, and I think you'd be perfect for the job." I was shocked. Me? But I've only been a waitress. Evelyn waved her hand, dismissing the thought. "You've been so much more than that. I've seen how you handle tough customers, how you organize the staff, and how you've balanced work, school, and motherhood. That's the kind of dedication and skill I need in a manager." It felt like a dream come true. A steady job with better pay and regular hours. It was exactly what Jack and I needed to start our new life. The next few years were full of positive changes. I threw myself into my new role at the restaurant, learning everything I could about management and business. Jack started school and grew into a smart, curious boy who loved to read and play baseball. It was at one of Jack's Little League games that I met Frank. He was there with his son, Tyler, who was playing on the other team. We started talking, and I was instantly drawn to his kind eyes and easy laugh. "Single, Dad?" I asked, noticing he was alone. He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "Widow, actually. Tyler's mom passed away when he was a baby. My heart ached for him." "I'm so sorry. That must be hard." "It is," he admitted, "but we manage." "How about you? Single, Mom?" I laughed. Is it that obvious? Our relationship developed slowly. We were both careful, having been hurt before, and with our children in the picture, we didn't rush things. But as months passed, I found myself falling for Frank. He was kind and patient, and Jack adored him. A year after we met, Frank proposed. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a quiet moment in his backyard with our boys playing nearby. Our wedding was small and intimate, with only close friends and family. As I walked down the aisle with Jack proudly by my side as the ring bearer, I caught Kelly's eye. She was crying, but her smile was radiant. Life with Frank, Jack, and Tyler soon settled into a comfortable rhythm. A couple of years after our wedding, we were blessed with another addition to our family. Our daughter Betty was born on a warm spring morning. As I held her in my arms with Frank, Jack, and Ty gathered around the hospital bed, I felt a sense of completeness I had never known before. I loved all three of my children equally. Jack and Betty, my biological children, and Tyler, my stepson. Blood didn't matter. They were all my kids. One evening, Aunt Kelly was over helping with the kids when we were startled by a familiar voice coming from the TV. Larger than life were my parents. My father stood at a podium, waving to a cheering crowd. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Adam Johnson announces his candidacy for mayor. My heart nearly stopped. It had been years since I had seen my parents, even if only on a screen. My father looked older, his hair grayer, but his eyes still had that same stern, determined look I remembered so well. As we watched him speak about family values and moral integrity, Kelly's face twisted with anger. Hypocrites, she spat, her voice shaking with fury. I turned to her, shocked. Aunt Kelly? She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the screen. There's something you need to know, Laura. Something they've kept hidden for years. What? I asked, confused. What she told me next shook me to my core. Many years ago, before Julie and I were born, my parents had their first child, a boy. But he was born with severe physical disabilities, without legs. Instead of loving and caring for him, they left him at the hospital, too afraid that he would embarrass them. I felt a whirlwind of emotion, shock, disbelief, and a deep sadness for the brother I never knew. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked Aunt Kelly, my voice shaky. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Laura. I should have. But after what your parents did to you, I didn't want to add to your pain. That night, after the kids were in bed, I made a decision. I needed to find my brother. With Frank's support, we hired a private investigator. Weeks went by, and finally, we had a lead. My brother was alive, and against all odds, he had thrived. He was a successful writer, married with kids of his own. He had been adopted by a wealthy family that had given him every chance to succeed. Meeting him for the first time was surreal. Even though he looked different, I could see parts of myself in his face. His name was Larry, and he greeted me with a warm smile and open arms. I always knew I had a biological family out there somewhere, he said softly. I just never thought I'd find a sister. Over the next few months, Larry and I became close. I introduced him to my family, and he welcomed us into his. His wife, Julia, coincidentally the same name as my sister, made me laugh, and their 2 children became part of our extended family. 22 years had passed since the day my parents kicked me out. Life had moved on, bringing both joy and sorrow. My oldest, Jack, was now 20 and had just started college on a baseball scholarship. I couldn't have been prouder of the man he was becoming. One lazy Tuesday afternoon, I was scrolling through news articles when a familiar face caught my eye. It was my father, looking older but still carrying that same air of self-importance. The headline read, Mayor Adam Johnson discusses family values in exclusive interview. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the video. For a few minutes, I listened as my father talked about the importance of family and moral values. Then the interviewer asked about his children. My father's face softened into what I knew as his public sympathy look. I have one daughter, Julie. She's the light of our lives. Tragically, we lost 2 of our children. The pain never goes away, but it's made our family stronger. For days, I seethed with quiet rage. How dare they? How dare they erase me and Larry, pretending to be tragic, sympathetic figures? Almost as if fate was stepping in, Larry called. Laura, guess what? I'm doing a book signing in our hometown next week. It would mean the world to me if you could come. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I told him, a plan already forming in my mind. The following week, I found myself back in the city where I grew up. As I walked through the familiar streets, memories came rushing back, some good, but many painful. I pushed them aside, staying focused on what I needed to do. The book signing was being held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. As I entered, I realized Larry hadn't been exaggerating. Half the town seemed to be there. Local celebrities, Business leaders and politicians were all mingling, waiting for the event to start. And there in the front row sat my parents and Julie. My father, now the mayor, looked every bit the part of a distinguished politician. My mother, elegantly dressed, smiled and nodded at people she knew. Julie sat beside them. They hadn't noticed me yet. I found a seat near the back, my heart pounding so loudly, I thought everyone could hear it. Larry rolled onto the stage in his wheelchair to loud applause. He looked confident and comfortable in the spotlight. As he began talking about his book and his life, I saw my parents nodding, trying to look sympathetic. I was born with a severe disability, Larry said. No legs and other health issues. My biological parents abandoned me at the hospital, unable or unwilling to care for me. I watched my father closely, but his expression didn't change. No recognition, no shame, just the practiced look of a politician showing concern for someone else's story. It's a sad story, Larry continued, but I was lucky. I was adopted by a wonderful family who gave me every opportunity to succeed. Still, I always wondered about my birth family, who they were, and why they gave me up. The room was completely silent, everyone focused on Larry as he spoke. My heart raced, knowing the moment that would change everything was coming. Then Larry smiled, his eyes sparkling with a mix of humor and determination. But that's not the end of my story, he said. You see, I found my family. My sister Laura is here today. He turned toward me, extending his hand. Laura, would you join me on stage? A gasp spread through the audience as I stepped into the spotlight. Many faces showed recognition. After all, I had grown up in this town. But the most dramatic reactions were in the front row. My parents' faces went pale, their expressions shifting between shock, fear, and realization. Julie looked like she had seen a ghost. They knew their carefully built image was about to fall apart. My parents stood quickly, clearly planning to make a fast exit, but I wasn't about to let them escape the truth again. Mom, Dad, please stay, I called out, my voice echoing through the now silent room. I think it's time we had an honest conversation, don't you? My parents froze, trapped by the eyes of the entire audience. Slowly, reluctantly, they sat back down. I took a deep breath. Many of you knew me growing up. You knew my family. But there's a lot you didn't know, a lot that's been hidden for far too long. And then I told them everything. How my parents had abandoned Larry at the hospital because they were ashamed of his physical differences. How they had hidden his existence, building their reputation on lies. And then history repeated itself. I continued, my voice growing stronger. When I got pregnant at 19, they didn't offer support or understanding. They demanded I have an abortion, even though doctors warned it could leave me infertile. When I refused, they kicked me out, pregnant, alone, and abandoned, all to protect their perfect image. Gasps and whispers spread through the crowd. I saw people's disgusted looks aimed at my parents, who seemed to shrink in their seats. For years, I've heard them talk about family values and morality. I said, my voice full of emotion. But their actions tell a different story. They abandoned 2 of their children when we needed them the most. They erased us from their lives to keep up their perfect image. The room erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some at my parents, others at each other. Journalists who had come for a simple book signing were now furiously taking notes or speaking into their phones. In the middle of the uproar, I locked eyes with my father. The man who had once seemed so powerful in my childhood now looked small and defeated. My mother was openly crying, and Julie sat frozen, her face filled with shock and confusion. In the days that followed, the story blew up. It was all over the local news, then the national news. My father's political career crumbled overnight. The man who had preached about integrity and family values was exposed as a hypocrite. His position as mayor became impossible to hold, and within a week, he resigned, citing personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. The college where he had taught quickly distanced themselves, firing him. Amidst all the chaos, one thing became clear. My sister Julie made her choice. She stood firmly by our parents, refusing to face the truth. During a brief phone call, she hissed, "You've ruined everything. Don't contact me again. You're dead to me, just like you're dead to Mom and Dad." But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. A few days later, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in over 22 years. It was Paul, Julie's husband, and the father of my eldest son, Laura. "Hey," he said, his voice hesitant and almost shy. "I've been thinking about us, about what happened with Julie and me. We can't have children, and I thought, well, we have a son together. Maybe we could be a family." I couldn't contain my laughter. "You made up your mind 22 years ago, Paul. When I was pregnant with your child, you abandoned me. You married my sister, and now since you are unable to produce children with her, do you really believe that you will be able to return to me? No, that isn't how things operate. However, Laura..." "Paul, no. My family is gorgeous, and my hubby is amazing. You're not needed, and I most definitely don't want you. Farewell." I hung up with a sense of closure I wasn't aware I was missing. The surprises, however, didn't end there. I received an unexpected call from Paul's parents the following day. "Laura," inquired a hesitant voice. "This is Paul's mother, Lauren. We only recently learned of Jack. Is that accurate? Is our grandson here?" The subsequent discussion was poignant and enlightening. Paul and my parents had informed them that I had aborted a child and fled. For years, they had held the belief that their grandchild was non-existent. Lauren added, her voice cracking, "If that's okay with you, we'd like to meet him. Naturally, we are understanding if you choose not to have us in your lives." I paused to reflect. Paul's actions and the lies my parents uttered were the fault of Paul's parents. They too had been duped. Finally, I said, "Okay. I'll speak with Jack to check if he's willing to meet with you." Jack's grandparents' encounter with him went unexpectedly smoothly. Hugs, emotions, and a lot of catching up took place. Jack, who has always been generous, greeted them warmly. In the months that followed, everything became more routine. We started seeing Larry and his family on a daily basis, and they brought fun and joy into our house. All the grandchildren, whether biological or not, received affection from Aunt Kelly and Uncle Scott. About Julie and my parents, all I knew was snippets of information. In an attempt to avoid the controversy, they had relocated. Although I knew that telling the truth was the correct thing to do, I still felt sad for them. "Mom, the baby of that lady is crying in a coin locker in the middle of my brother's wedding." My daughter pointed at the bride and shouted, "This." The entire room erupted in murmurs. After all, my brother and his wife weren't supposed to have a baby yet, and in a coin locker. My 5-year-old daughter had a mysterious power. However, the bride, unaware of this, turned pale. The guests became angry, and the room filled with voices accusing us of poor parenting. Even worse, our relatives stood up with fearful expressions and left the venue. Thus, my daughter caused the wedding to descend into chaos. But soon after, a more terrifying truth came to light. I got married at 25 and gave birth at 27. My husband said, "She looks just like Nancy. She's so cute." He hugged our newborn daughter, Emma, in the delivery room. Now she's 5. We noticed she had a strange ability when she was about 3. For example, one time when my mother was on the phone, my daughter suddenly said, "Grandma, you're talking to a fake uncle." Uncle referred to my brother. I had my mother put the call on hold and asked her who she was talking to and about what. It turned out she was almost the victim of an impersonation scam. When we praised our daughter, she proudly put her hands on her hips and said, "The person behind told me." Emma always says this when she uncovers something, so it's probably some kind of guardian spirit she can see. While her ability has often been helpful, it's not always a good thing, as she sometimes reveals people's secrets. Once, she even ruined a surprise party by spilling the secret to the person it was for. Emma is only 5, so she doesn't understand how to judge these things. That's why we've taught her not to mention what the person behind tells her in front of anyone outside the family. My brother John is someone Emma adores, and we have always been close. When he announced his wedding, my family was overjoyed. John works in research at a fairly large company, earning around $70,000 a year. However, since he hadn't been involved with any women until his late 30s, both he and our family had almost given up on the idea of him getting married. I've loved my gentle brother since we were little, and I always wish someone would eventually see his good qualities. What can you do? I guess John is just the type who remains a good guy, but never more, I thought, trying to make peace with the situation. But when a woman finally agreed to marry him, our whole family welcomed her with open arms. The woman, Amy, is 34, 4 years younger than my brother, and apparently she was the one who asked him out. They started dating about 6 months ago, and recently she was the one who proposed to him. He told us this shyly, looking so happy that it made our family happy too. On the day John brought her over to introduce her as his fiancée, of course, I came along with my daughter. "Nice to meet you. I'm Amy." "Thank you for having me," she said, bowing her head in greeting. Emma murmured happily, "The baby is coming too." I interpreted this as meaning they would soon have children after getting married, which made me even more pleased. It was unusual for Emma to talk about the future, as she usually predicted things that were hidden in the present. Still, I didn't think much of it, but Amy gave Emma a strange look and glared at her. "What are you talking about? That's so creepy," she shouted with an annoyed expression. "Emma, it's okay." Amy is probably just surprised. I comforted my daughter, who looked scared and on the verge of tears from Amy's harsh reaction. Not everyone believed in Emma's abilities, and some, like Amy, found them unsettling. That might be the normal reaction, but since she was the woman my brother had chosen, I believed she would eventually understand. So I focused on calming Emma down. At that moment, she probably just associated marriage with having a baby. "It's just something a child would say, so don't worry about it, Amy." Even so, it was the first time someone had reacted so strongly. Something feels off, I thought, but Amy otherwise seemed polite and kind, so I tried not to let it bother me. However, on the day of the wedding, something unexpected happened. The ceremony was solemn, with both families gathered together, and everything proceeded smoothly up to a certain point. The vows were exchanged, and the ceremony was approaching its finale when suddenly Emma stood up. My husband and I hurriedly tried to get her to sit down quietly, but she suddenly ran forward and pointed at the bride. The baby of this lady is crying in a coin locker. When I looked at Amy, who was at the end of Emma's gaze, she had gone pale and was muttering something under her breath. Since I was near the bride's seat trying to stop Emma, I barely caught her saying things like, "How did she know?" and "What the hell is that kid?" Seeing her panicked reaction, I realized that Emma had hit the mark, but only a few of us, including myself, understood this. Amy quickly raised her head and glared at Emma. "Stop saying nonsense." "What baby?" Just because you're a child doesn't mean you can ruin my wedding. The bride's outburst seemed to convince her relatives to side with her. It wasn't surprising, since to those unaware of Emma's mysterious ability, it would seem like she had suddenly blurted out something absurd. However, hearing murmurs like, "What terrible manners," from the bride's side made my chest tighten with pain. But she's telling the truth. As I looked around, I noticed that our relatives also had terrifying expressions, which only made me shrink back even more. But unlike me, who felt pathetic, Emma bravely stood tall, her head held high. The baby is crying for help. It's in a coin locker at a nearby department store. "Someone please go help." My little daughter desperately repeated her words, undeterred by the cold stares from the adults around her. The moment they heard this, our relatives, still wearing those stern expressions, stood up, ready to follow Emma's words. Saying that saving the baby's life was the top priority, they began to leave the venue one by one. Despite our efforts to keep her quiet, our young Emma had sometimes let slip information about the person behind her. This is why our relatives knew about her ability. They often watched over her, joking that there was no risk of being deceived as long as Emma was around. So at that moment, they must have immediately believed her plea. Now that I think about it, when they had those terrifying expressions, they seemed to be glaring at the bride. My husband, saying he would go with them, left Emma in my care and followed our relatives out. Less than an hour later, I received a call from my husband and was able to hear about the situation. It seems that thanks to Emma's words and the collective effort of our relatives, the baby was found. However, it couldn't be said that the baby was safe. There was a lot of commotion at the scene, and according to my husband, the baby looked as though it had just been born. The baby appeared limp, and it was immediately clear that its condition was critical, so they quickly called an ambulance. Why would Emmy do something like this? No matter what the circumstances, this is unforgivable. As anger welled up inside me, I asked my husband to get help from the people around him for a few specific tasks. I also made a call to a certain place. After taking care of everything I needed to do, I left Emma with my mother, who was with me, and headed to the waiting room where my brother and Amy were. My brother was in the waiting room trying to get an explanation from her. However, since there was no solid evidence yet, I didn't expect Amy to easily admit to anything. My brother likely wanted to believe in his fiancée, so he probably wasn't able to push her too hard and was just trying to keep her there. That's why I knew I had to go to them after hearing what my husband had told me. When I entered the waiting room, Amy was completely frustrated. Not only had the ceremony been interrupted, but in the chaos, the scheduled time for the wedding had passed, and it could no longer be resumed. There's a set time we can use the chapel, you know that, right? That time has already passed. Why would John's relatives take a kid's word so seriously? To her, it must have felt like her special day had been utterly ruined. Not only that, but the start of the reception had also been delayed, and all the guests except for our relatives were kept waiting. Amy continued, "That brat is totally unacceptable. She keeps saying creepy things. What is she? Some kind of curse. I swear I want to dump her in a mountain." Emma was a beloved niece to my brother, who was doing his best to calm Amy down. However, when she spoke about his niece like that, he couldn't help but frown. "John, you should call off the wedding," I told my brother, trying to keep the fury boiling inside me from showing in my voice. I said it as calmly as I could. Amy turned her bloodshot eyes toward me, glaring, but John remained composed as if he'd anticipated my suggestion. He sighed quietly. So what Emma said was right after all. I was hoping she'd be wrong this time. Though he only managed a slight bitter smile, I could tell his heart was sinking in sadness. Amy then rounded on me, her face twisted in rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? Accusing me without any proof, ruining the wedding. And now you want to call it off." She was furious and advanced on me like a demon, not even noticing the look of disappointment on John's face. Amy shouted, "If that brat isn't going to be held accountable, then you should be. Pay up for damn damages, or better yet, I'll sue you for defamation and make you pay a hefty settlement." Amy's loud voice echoed through the room, and I had to resist the urge to cover my ears. "So you said there's no proof, huh? But Emma was right, wasn't she? A baby was actually found. Do you understand what that means?" Amy scoffed. "And so what? What, some random kid was found somewhere? What does that have to do with me?" "It has everything to do with you. A DNA test will easily reveal who the mother is, and when it does, it'll be undeniable proof that you have a secret child. There's no way out of this." As soon as I said that, it occurred to me that there was a small possibility that the baby might not be her secret child. "John, I don't think so, but is there any chance that baby is yours?" I asked just to be sure, although it seemed impossible since they'd only been dating for 6 months. John replied firmly, "Absolutely not. The timing doesn't match up." His unwavering response caused Amy to scowl in frustration. If John had acted like a normal man and made a move, we could have raised the child as our own. But now it's all ruined because you're so slow. Her absurd attempt to shift the blame made me sigh deeply in exasperation. "So who is the father?" Amy hesitated before replying. "It's a child from a previous boyfriend, but I don't know which one." Her answer left both my brother and me speechless. That meant there were multiple possible fathers, which was shocking. How many people had she been seeing at once? Having a child with an unknown father was entirely her own reckless doing, and trying to blame John was utterly misplaced. If I'd known she was this kind of woman, I would never have considered marriage. No, I should be thankful I found out before the wedding. The marriage hasn't been registered yet. I'm going to call it off." John heaved a deep sigh before making his decision, and Amy looked at him like she was the victim. Amy then whined, "I specifically chose the guy with the most money. What about my future plans? How are you going to fix this?" During the formal meeting, she had declared how much she loved John more than anyone else, but hearing her lament now made it clear that was a complete lie. She was only trying to marry him for his high salary. Amy continued to rant, "Getting pregnant ruined everything. I finally caught an elite, and now to find out I'm carrying someone else's baby. This is just bad luck." According to the story, she confessed to playing the role of the tragic heroine. Amy realized she was pregnant quite late. It was a combination of factors. She had irregular periods, experienced very mild morning sickness, and her belly didn't show much. All of these things contributed to her delayed awareness. Amy had tried to pretend the pregnancy didn't exist, but by the time she visited an obstetrician, she had already passed 22 weeks, which was too late for that option. So she decided to hide the pregnancy from everyone, including my brother, give birth in secret, and then abandon the baby. Since her belly didn't show much, she took advantage of that by wearing loose-fitting clothes to hide her figure. She also blamed her limited physical movement on general health issues. No one suspected that she was pregnant, so they didn't question her behavior. Amy complained, "John's desire to have the wedding around this time was just bad luck for me." But if I objected without a reason, it would have seemed suspicious. What concerned her most during the wedding preparations was whether the waistline of her dress would fit on the day of the ceremony. With her due date so close, she couldn't predict whether she'd give birth before or after the wedding. "Well, usually people avoid scheduling weddings in the final month of pregnancy," I said. Amy responded, "Exactly. But how could I possibly say I was pregnant? So I had no choice but to pick a dress that could accommodate any changes in my size. As she spoke, she showed off her wedding dress with an adjustable waistline. My husband added, so the story about gaining weight but planning to diet because your size might change was a lie too. And so was the business trip excuse. According to my brother, Amy claimed she had an urgent overseas business trip from the previous week until the morning of the wedding, which is why they hadn't seen each other. But she was probably in the hospital for the birth, not abroad. Amy said, I was so nervous that the baby might be born right in the middle of the ceremony. Her priorities were completely misplaced as she casually mentioned that the baby was born just a week before the wedding, and that she had been discharged from the hospital only the day before. Amy laughed and said, I wanted to get rid of the baby as quickly as possible, so I didn't even bring it home. I went straight from the locker to the wedding venue. I just barely made it in time. Her casual attitude was shocking. Amy continued, but I left the baby in a locker where lots of people passed by. Someone would have heard it crying and taken care of it. The area has good air conditioning, so it's fine. By saying it's fine, she was trying to claim that she hadn't done anything dangerous. What are you talking about? Did you really think everything would work out that smoothly? In reality, the baby's cries were mostly drowned out by the noise in the department store. Even those who heard the cries assumed it was just someone else's child. If Emma hadn't insisted on searching for the baby, it might have been in serious danger, as evidenced by the fact that it was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Abandoning a newborn like that is beyond unacceptable. Even if you couldn't raise the child, you should have at least taken it to a facility. Amy shrugged and said, what else could I have done? The baby was born just before the wedding. I was in a rush, so it couldn't be helped. Her lack of remorse was infuriating. My brother was just as stunned, realizing what kind of person he had almost married. Let me make this clear, what you did could lead to criminal charges. Do you understand that? Amy's eyes widened in surprise, and she began to panic, looking around anxiously. There's no evidence. You said earlier that they could easily find out I'm the mother, but the police can't prove I was the one who left the baby in the locker. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and confidently said this, believing she was in the clear. You really don't think things through, do you? Did you even check if there were security cameras in the area? The locker area was fully covered by security cameras, something I had already taken steps to verify after hearing about the baby's discovery. I asked my husband to request the store staff to review the footage. I had also reported the incident to the police, so they were likely checking the footage as well. Additionally, I had sent my husband a photo of John and Amy together, a celebratory picture my brother had taken during their pre-wedding photo shoot. Never imagining it would be used to identify someone on security footage, with my husband likely showing that photo to the store staff or the police, it was only a matter of time before they reached Amy. As I explained all of this, Amy's face turned paler with each passing moment, and by the time I finished, she had collapsed onto the floor, her face as white as a sheet. No, that's not possible. They can't know. You're bluffing, right? They can't arrest me. She muttered in disbelief, struggling to accept reality. However, she turned belligerent and resisted being taken into custody when the police soon arrived. Nah, give me up. I'm not to blame. That brat and those people are the only ones to blame. With a shocked expression on his face, my brother observed her struggle, and it was evident how devastated he was. I looked back to Amy. You said that the marriage hasn't been formally registered, correct? You are still only his fiancée in legal terms, not his wife. However, compensation will still need to be paid. Compensation? Amy stumbled over her words. "We will absolutely recoup the expenditures of the wedding and reception. My brother will determine the exact amount. You've lost a great deal in this marriage that you were so excited about, but we won't be forgiving." Amy's expression darkened with grief after hearing this, and she eventually gave up, resisting as she was carried away. Naturally, the wedding reception was called off after that, and all of the cash gifts were given back. The costs expended were billed to Amy as compensation and were as stated. However, her parents had to pay the charges because she was incarcerated and unable to pay right away. Her parents insisted that she repay every penny after she was freed, even though the sum was more than $40,000. Amy's father, who had always seemed to be mild-mannered, was so angry that it was frightening to watch. So even though they were her parents, it was obvious they would be harsh in having her repay it. Thankfully, the infant lived, and after being released from the hospital without incident, Amy's parents adopted her. The child appears to be growing up robust and healthy these days. After everything that occurred, my brother was down for a while, but he recently found someone new, and they appear to get along well. According to my daughter, the person behind Uncle claims that they are a wonderful fit. Upon introducing the new woman to Emma, my daughter excitedly informed us of this. Emma's special talents have been appreciated by his new fiancé, and Emma, my brother, and I are all excited and full of optimism for the future. How much did you like this tale? Kindly remember to subscribe to the channel. In the upcoming video, I'll see you. Jenna is my name. Growing up, Linda, my twin sister, and I were very different from one another. I was not the golden girl, she was. Our mom was the ideal housewife, devoted to her family and home, and she always encouraged us to follow her lead. Our dad was a severe university professor who was buried in books and lectures. Being at home has always felt to me like sitting through an endless round of criticism. My parents had envisioned the ideal family, and it did not include a quiet daughter who wore band t-shirts. My mother's favorite thing to say, "Jenna, why can't you be more like your sister?" was generally directed at me when I would show up at breakfast wearing headphones in an attempt to block out the outside world. Linda, however, was enveloped in a sense of validation. "Why is it so difficult for you to wear a nice dress and smile more?" she would ask, casually tossing her flawless hair over her shoulder. She seemed to be from a distant world. On a particularly difficult Saturday, I made the decision to rebel in the tiniest way. I knew how as our family prepared for one of Dad's faculty parties, a complete bore, but an event we had to attend. I wore boots that most obviously did not fit the accepted norm and applied my darkest eyeliner. "You're not leaving in that manner, are you?" Mom saw me coming up the stairs, gazing at my boots as though they were filthy. I shrugged, using my go to cover. I failed to see why not. She let out a long, drawn-out sigh, as if I were the biggest letdown in her world of flawless organization. "Jenna, please, could you try fitting in for once?" "Why? Can you just act like we're a perfect family?" Weary of the same old debate, I fired back. "It's not about acting. It's about honoring your father," she asserted, adopting a firm, businesslike tone in her voice. Hearing the conversation, Linda came trotting down the hall, sounding like a judge stepping up to the bench with her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Amy, Mom is correct. Trying to appear good is not that difficult. Why must you always make things challenging?" My face started to get flushed, so I said, "I don't want to be a clone of you, Linda." I detested being compared to others in these fights, but I detested feeling different in my own house the most of all. At the foot of the stairs, Dad materialized, his brows strained. "Jenna, get up and move." He stated emphatically, We're leaving in 15 minutes, giving no opportunity for debate. He didn't have to yell, so he didn't. The disillusionment in his gaze was sufficient to make me retreat to my room, replace my boots with simple flats, and remove half of my eyeliner. Except for the soothing classical music Dad insisted on playing, the car was silent as we made our way to the celebration. Gazing out the window, I observed the trees flitting by. At that very moment, I made a pledge to myself. One day, I would live a life free from outside influences that dictated my appearance, behavior, or identity. I'd be free from these expectations one day. The only area of the home where I could imagine being somewhere else was my room. My room was mine, but the rest of the home was filled with my parents' preferences. Though it wasn't much, just 3 walls covered with music posters and sketches, it served as my haven from the demands of my family. One evening, while I was attempting to lose myself in my favorite band's playlist, Dad came knocking on my door and strode into my room, his expression fixed in a well-known grimace. "Jenna, please quiet down. Additionally, why didn't you study with Linda today? You both know you have tests coming up," he stated in a firm tone. I took out one earbud and gave him a calm gaze while attempting to speak. "My studies have been going on, but not with Linda. I learn best when I'm by myself." Dad shook his head, obviously not convinced. "You are aware of the guidelines. You ought to be striving for the same academic success as your sister. Why you have to make things tough all the time is beyond me." "It's not about making things hard," I murmured as my annoyance mounted. "I don't see why I have to follow Linda's instructions for everything. Can't I learn in the way that suits me best?" He didn't respond to that, just switched to another complaint. "And those friends of yours, I saw you with them at the cafe yesterday. I don't think they're a good influence. You should be spending time with the daughters of my colleagues. They're more suitable." I felt my temper rising. Suitable for what? For you? Because they talk about economics and pretend to enjoy those boring university gatherings. Before he could answer, Mom appeared at the doorway, her voice sharp. "Jenna, your father is right. Those girls are from good families. They know how to behave. They're the kind of friends you should want." I stood up, facing both of them. What if I don't want friends who are picked for me? What if I want to choose my own friends, choose what I study, or even decide what I want to be? "That's enough, Jenna," Mom said firmly. "You know your future is with the university. Your father has made sure of that. And after you graduate, you'll need to start thinking about settling down. We've already discussed this." Settling down? The words felt like a prison sentence. "You mean thinking about being someone's wife like Linda? Is that all you think I've meant for?" Mom's face softened a bit, but her voice stayed firm. "We want what's best for you. Following the path we've set out will give you a good life." "A good life?" I repeated, the irony bitter in my mouth. Is it a good life if it's someone else's idea of good? No one answered. They didn't need to. We all knew there was no point in arguing. They had their plans, and they expected me to follow them, just like Linda. Linda and I were like 2 sides of the same coin, always together but never on the same page. At the university where Dad taught, the differences between us became even clearer. She was into business management, the golden child, always nodding along in lectures and asking smart questions that made the professor smile. Me, I was stuck in the same program, but it felt like wearing the shoe on the wrong foot. Awkward, uncomfortable, and just plain wrong. One afternoon, as I was struggling through a pile of textbooks in the library, Linda breezed in, her notes organized, her smile ready. "Hey, Emmy, you coming to the study group tonight? Professor Hall mentioned he might drop by. It could be good for us to show up," she said, her tone light but insistent. I glanced up, feeling the weight of her expectations. No, I don't think so. Those things aren't really my scene, you know. She frowned, putting her books down with a thud that matched her disapproval. It's not about it being your scene, Emmy. It's about making the right impressions. You need to start taking this seriously. We're graduating soon. I shrugged and turned back to my notes. I am taking it seriously, just not in a way that makes me unhappy. Why should I pretend? Because, Amy, sometimes you have to play the game to get ahead, she said, waving at her neat textbooks and color-coded notes. It's not about liking it. It's about doing what's necessary. I shook my head and pushed my chair back with a scrape. Well, maybe I'm tired of doing what's necessary according to everyone else. Have you ever thought of that? Her voice softened, but her eyes were still firm. Amy, I'm just trying to help you. Dad won't always be around to fix things. What will you do if you keep pushing everyone away? Maybe I'll figure it out on my own. Maybe I don't need to follow Dad's path or yours, I replied, feeling a surge of defiance. Linda sighed, clearly frustrated. You're so stubborn. Just try, okay, for me, if not for yourself. Show up tonight and talk to Professor Hall. It won't kill you. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just my perfect sister, but someone who cared in her own way. Fine, I'll think about it. I conceded, not ready to promise more. Thank you, she said, her smile returning. It's not that bad, you know. You might even like it if you gave it a chance. Doubt it, I muttered, but I knew I had lost this round. For Linda, I'd show up, sit through another boring discussion, and not at the right times. It was just a few hours. How bad could it be? As it turned out, not as bad as I thought. Professor Hall was surprisingly interesting when he wasn't lecturing from a podium. I even asked a question, which earned a shocked but pleased look from Linda. Later, as we walked back to our dorm, Linda nudged me. See, not so terrible, right? That fragile piece didn't last long. In our final year, Linda introduced us to her fiancé, a lawyer 12 years older, already well-established, and exactly what our parents dreamed of. Mom and Dad were thrilled, praising Linda for making such a smart choice. Then they turned their hopeful eyes on me. Now, Jenna, it's your turn to find someone suitable, Dad said one evening over dinner, his tone implying my time was running out. Mom nodded enthusiastically, already planning out my life, as if it were another one of her well-organized projects. Think about your future, dear. Someone who can provide for you, who has a good standing. I remember staring at my plate, feeling trapped. Linda's wedding was planned down to the smallest detail by Mom, from the bridesmaids' dresses to the flowers. Everything showed off her perfect vision of family prestige. After the wedding, Mom often visited Linda, giving advice and making sure Linda's life went exactly as she had planned. Watching this, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want my life controlled by someone else. One day, I was walking down the street, lost in thoughts about escaping the life my parents wanted for me when I heard the deep rumble of a motorcycle. Curiosity made me look. That's when I saw him, Brian, with his leather jacket and carefree smile, pulling up beside me. You look like you need a ride, he called over the roar of the engine, a playful sparkle in his eyes. I hesitated, looking back toward the path home, then at his outstretched hand. What did I have to lose? Sure, why not? I said, my voice a mix of nerves and excitement. Climbing onto the back of his bike, I felt a rush of adrenaline as we sped away. The wind whipped through my hair, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed. A real laugh. Brian shouted something about showing me his world, and I held on tighter, not wanting the moment to end. We stopped at a diner popular with bikers. Over burgers and fries, Brian told me about his life as a welder, his love for bikes, and his passion for the open road. It was so different from anything I was used to, raw and real. "Don't you get scared living like this?" I asked, my voice barely rising above the clatter of plates and chatter around us. "Scared? No, it's thrilling. You never know what's around the corner. Isn't that better than having everything planned out for you?" He replied, his eyes lighting up with each word. Over the next few weeks, we met in secret. Each ride on Brian's motorcycle took me further from the life I was supposed to live and closer to the life I wanted. The speed, the adventure, it wasn't just about the thrill. It was about feeling alive, feeling free. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a secluded overlook, Brian turned to me. "Jenna, I don't just ride to escape. I ride to feel alive, to make every moment count with you. Every moment feels like it's worth something." I leaned into him, my heart beating fast. "I've never felt like this before. You make me feel free, Brian." He smiled, pulling me closer. "Then let's not go back to just existing. Let's live." 5 months with Brian felt like a lifetime of moments I had always dreamed of. The day he would propose under the stars, with the gentle rumble of his bike in the background, my heart said yes before my mouth could form the word. It was perfect, except for one big problem: my parents. I was scared to introduce Brian to them. He was everything they disapproved of: his rough edges, his wild spirit, his simple but happy life as a welder. But love gave me courage, and I decided it was time for them to know. The day I brought Brian home, he wore his usual leather vest, red t-shirt, ripped jeans, and a bandana. I loved that about him. He was always himself. As we walked up the driveway, I could already feel the weight of my parents' judgment. When we stepped inside, Mom's face went pale at the sight of Brian, her eyes widening in shock. "What in the world, Jenna?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Dad's reaction was harsher, his words sharp as knives. "Who is this, and why is he dressed like a thug in our house?" I took a deep breath to steady my nerves. "Mom, Dad, this is Brian. He's the man I love. We're getting married." The silence was deafening. Then Dad turned to Brian, his tone full of disdain. "Married? What do you do for a living, young man? What are your qualifications?" Brian, bless him, didn't waver. "I'm a welder. I took some specialized courses after high school. I work hard and make an honest living." The look on my parents' faces was a mix of horror and disbelief. Mom looked like she might faint. "A welder? Jenna, you can't be serious." Dad's voice rose, anger flaring. "You expect us to bless this? To throw away your future for a welder?" I felt my resolve harden. "Yes, because he makes me happy. Isn't that what should matter? But the life you'll lead." Mom started, her voice trembling. "It will be the life I choose." I shot back, my own voice gaining strength. Dad shook his head, his decision clear. "We cannot and will not support this. If you choose him, don't expect to be a part of this family." The finality in his tone broke my heart, but not my decision. Brian squeezed my hand, giving me the strength to face them. "Then I choose Brian. I choose us. I choose my happiness." Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's jaw clenched tight. "If you walk out with him, don't bother coming back," Dad said, his voice cold. Walking away from my parents' house with Brian, my heart was a mess of emotions: pain, relief, excitement, and fear all mixed into one. The night air felt different, like each breath was a new beginning. I took a step further into a new life. We rode in silence for a while, the steady roar of the motorcycle beneath us. When we finally stopped at a small diner on the edge of town, Brian turned to me with a serious look. "Are you sure about this, Jenna?" I mean really sure. There's no going back after tonight, he said, his eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt. I nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. I've never been more sure of anything. Being with you feels right. It feels like what I'm meant to do. He smiled that reckless, charming smile that had won me over the first day we met. All right then, let's do it. Let's start our life together. Inside the diner, we found a quiet booth in the corner. The waitress brought us 2 coffees without asking, and we sat there planning our next steps. So what's first? I asked, stirring cream into my coffee and watching it swirl. We'll need to find a place to stay, at least for a while, and maybe look for jobs. I have some buddies who can help us get started, Brian replied, sounding practical but hopeful. It's going to be tough, isn't it? I said, more as a statement than a question. The reality of what we were doing was starting to sink in. Brian reached across the table and covered my hand with his. It might be, but we'll handle it together. Tough is nothing new for either of us, right? I couldn't help but laugh, a short, genuine burst of amusement. Right. Together, we spent hours in that diner talking and planning. Every so often, Brian would mention an idea that sounded so wild and free that it made my heart jump. And maybe one day we'll save enough to take that road trip across the country. Just you, me, and the open road. I like that, I said, allowing myself to dream bigger than I ever had. Riding back into the city, we began our search. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. We found a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Brian found work at a local garage, and I picked up shifts at a nearby diner. Life was hard, but it was ours. We made do with what we had, and every night when we came home to each other, it felt like we had everything. Months later, we decided it was time to make it official and got married in a small, intimate ceremony. I held on to a small hope that my family would show up, that they would see how happy I was and let go of their prejudices. But the chairs we had reserved for them stayed empty, and no congratulatory messages came. Despite the sting of their absence, the day was perfect because it was ours. Over time, I grew very close to Brian's mom. She welcomed me with open arms, calling me her daughter and filling in the gaps left by my own family. Her warmth and acceptance helped heal some of the wounds left by my parents' rejection. Things finally started looking up for Brian and me after he completed some additional training and became a certified underwater welder. His income shot up to $230,000 a year. That change made a huge difference. Friends, we managed to buy a townhouse in a nice area, the kind of place I had always dreamed about, but never thought I'd actually live in. I started working as a dispatcher in Brian's company. It wasn't just a job, it felt like I was part of something important, supporting the man I loved and building our future together. On weekends, we escaped the city on his bike, roaring through winding roads and taking in the breathtaking views of nature. Those moments, with the wind in my hair and Brian's warmth against my back, were pure bliss. Living nearby, my mother-in-law became a frequent visitor. One afternoon, while Brian was tinkering in the garage and I was making coffee, she arrived looking a bit troubled. "There's been some bad news," she said as she settled down at the kitchen table. Something about a professor at the university involved in a harassment scandal. My heart skipped a beat. Did they say who it was? I tried to keep my voice steady, dreading the answer. She shook her head. No, they didn't mention a name on the radio, but you know how these things go. It's probably all over the TV by now. Nodding, I turned on the television and tuned into the news. Sure enough, there was a report on the scandal. As I had feared, my father's face appeared on the screen. The anchor detailed the accusations against him, and I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. Turning off the TV, I sat down heavily, trying to process the news. Brian came in, wiping his hands on a rag, and saw my face. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "It's my dad. He's been accused of harassing a student." Brian's expression grew serious for a moment before he came over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Jenna. That's tough news. How do you want to handle this?" I shook my head, feeling unsure about everything. "I don't know. I mean, what can I even do? We're not close anymore." He squeezed my hand, showing he understood. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We don't have to figure it all out right now." I decided to wait and see how things unfolded before making any moves. Whatever decision I made, I knew Brian would be by my side, and that gave me the strength to face whatever came next. Life had been peaceful until that unexpected afternoon at work when a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. I hadn't seen my parents in a long time, and the sight of them stirred up a mix of emotions I thought I had put to rest. They both looked dramatically different. The scandal had taken its toll. Mom had lost a lot of weight and looked much older, while Dad seemed broken, a shadow of the stern man he once was. My mother saw me and rushed over, arms open as if nothing had happened, as if years of distance and disapproval could be erased in an instant. But I couldn't embrace her. Not now. Instead, I stepped back and took Brian's hand, drawing strength from his presence. "Jenna, it was so hard to find you," Mom said, her voice cracking with emotion. Dad, always the blunt one, got straight to the point. His voice was harsh and bitter. "I was accused unfairly, you know. I went to your sister's husband for help, but that leech wanted a fortune. Your sister sided with him, and now they've kicked us out. We need your help." I was filled with fury and disbelief as I glanced at them. "Hade, you appear and ask for assistance after all these years." Mom said the frantic words, "We have nowhere else to go. They have also disowned us. We might be able to stay with you, we thought." I nearly laughed at the ridiculousness. "Will you remain with me? Following your disavowal of me? You explicitly stated that I was no longer your daughter." Dad's scarlet cheeks signaled a relapse of his old fury. "Jenna, you owe us for everything we've done for you." With renewed resolution, I answered, "That's where you're wrong." As I cut them off, I feel Brian give me a supportive hand squeeze. "I owe you nothing at all. I chose happiness above your demands, and you kicked me out for it. Now you want to move in and pretend like we're a family again." As things started to get out of hand, I noticed that a small group of individuals was observing. Mom broke out in tears, attracting further attention with her loud sobs. Through sobs, she charged, "You're being ungrateful after everything we've done for you." I inhaled deeply, knowing what I wanted to do. "I'm not ungrateful, Mom, I promise. I'm content and at liberty. You now have to live with the decisions you made." I heard my dad screaming as we were leaving, but Brian reached over and said to the security personnel, "Don't let them come here again." Those next few months passed quickly, chock full of serenity and love. With the arrival of our baby, our expanding family began anew. My parents left and never returned. The last time I saw them was that day in the parking lot. Even though I felt sad about what might have been, I knew that I had chosen well for my family and myself.